Today I'm going to talk about when you should give up in order to succeed.
Welcome to Missing the Mark, where we look for meaning in strange places. I'm Christopher.
So, while the title of this video may seem a little bit clickbaity, I do actually mean it. Obviously, not in a completely literal sense, like give up in order to succeed at the thing in exactly the way that you gave up on it. What I really mean is how to give up at particular goals in order to succeed at your bigger goal. And what this sort of comes down to is in life, there are a lot of times when you are pursuing a goal. So you have a goal. In order to realize the goal, you have to come up with various means. Now, the various means always entail, for anything that isn't completely trivial, like picking up a glass of water, the various means entail a collection of sub-goals along the way. So you break the bigger thing up into smaller projects that lead to the longer-term goal. And there are times in life when it will turn out that actually you didn't do a good job of that. You broke it up incorrectly, that the thing that you thought would lead you to your eventual goal isn't. And this is especially the case when these sorts of goals are provided to you by the culture in which you live as the standard way of accomplishing something. That's an especially good way of finding that you're working at goals that really you shouldn't be working at. That they're not really in service of your true goal. They're just sort of like the common knowledge, the common approach to how to get to what most people's goals are. And not always great ones at that. So, this can be small, but it can also be big. And so an example that may well apply to a lot of people is people will have the goal. So like the ultimate goal is happiness, right? Or as Aristotle put it in the approximately the only part of the metaphysics that I have actually read so far, all human beings naturally desire to be happy. Well, yeah, they do. Now, what does that consist of? And I mean, this is, by the way, a great way to get into philosophy. It's like, I like happiness. How do I get more of it? Well, next question I need to ask is, what is this? What is happiness? What constitutes happiness? Because I'll only know how to get more of it if I know what it is. And then once you ask what it is, you can ask what actually leads to happiness and which of these things can I do more of. And, well, take this seriously and you'll be doing philosophy. And there'll be a bunch of people that'll be worth reading that can help you out on this because other people have thought about this question too. It's a very practical one. But one thing that a lot of people have as their answer to how to be happy is, your basic thing of go to college, get a job, find a spouse, settle down. Children these days are an optional portion of this. Sometimes yes, sometimes people say like, oh, actually you'll have a lot more fun without kids. So don't bother with the kids part. But you are going to need some other person in your life so that the two of you can mistake each other for God, and this way you can try to be happy. No one ever says that explicitly. Just kind of trying for humor by being explicit where people are more often leave that as implicit. But here's the thing, especially if you don't want children, then the question goes up of, well, what are you doing trying to find a spouse? What is the actual goal involved here? Like, oh, everybody should have another person that is like a roommate and also where you rub your genitals against them periodically. Why? Why is that? Well, it's normal. Well, I mean, a lot of versions of this aren't normal. The one where you specifically try not to have children isn't in fact normal. It's becoming common. But how about instead of saying it's normal, especially about things that aren't, you instead ask, what is this thing's relationship to happiness? What do you actually expect to happen that will lead to happiness here? And I've seen various versions of this, and one of them that I've always found curious is, I remember someone was talking about, it was a priest I had read about, where he was talking about his, as he was, contemplating whether or not he had a vocation. And one of the things that he was worried about was giving up all of the comfort involved in having a wife. And being a married man at the time when I read this, I couldn't help but laugh and think, where do you think most of your problems are going to come from? And this isn't like a dig against wives. I mean, a husband will cause an awful lot of of a wife's problem, simply because the two are bound so closely together. They can't help and need each other, and are such a large fraction of each other's lives that, being imperfect, they can't help but be one of the major causes of problems for the other, simply because they're such a large fraction of the other person's life. You spend so much of your life with your spouse, on a day-to-day, minute-by-minute basis, that you can't help but cause them, cause a lot of the problems that they face. You also solve a lot of the problems that they face, and ideally you make their life better, and ideally the two of you are so good at doing this that you have enough extra to make other people, make new people and make their lives better. So please don't take me as saying anything cynical about marriage, but at the same time, it's like the comforts are basically there to help you survive all the problems that it causes. It's not there to be greatly in excess to support you in other things. I mean, marriage is a vocation for people who are so good at taking care of themselves, they have so much extra to take care of other people, especially small, helpless people. Marriage is not a vocation for people who need help just surviving. And I'm not trying to say that particular person thought of it in those terms. That's just sort of what it led me to think about, because I've seen that sort of thing that I'm describing now elsewhere. And so this is a good example of where asking, like, is this really my goal? Like, is this really going to lead to happiness? Do I really want, what will this path entail? And part of that is like, what goods does it entail? Well, like, you might make new people. Not everybody who's married gets that privilege, but if you, even if they try, but you may get to make new people, and then you may get to serve these new people, often in a very, very literal sense, like you bring them their food and that's the only reason they can eat. And you become a servant to these people. It is very, very, very much along, when Jesus washed his disciples' feet and said that, if I serve you, then how should you treat others? Well, this is exactly what parents have to do. Traditionally, parents are in a higher status than their children, but they very much have to serve their children, because a 1-year-old, you have to wait on them hand and foot. They can't do anything for themselves. Like they're at one, they're not really even competent to wash their own hands. They sure as heck can't like get their own shoes on and tie their own shoes. I mean, it'll probably some, every now and again there'll be an exception who's just like phenomenal at this or what have you, or some particularly easy shoes or whatever. But like, in general, good luck finding a 1-year-old who can change their own diaper. So yeah, like it's a path of service. Is that really the sort of service you want to give to other human beings? Like, do you really want to do things? Like, is the manner of serving that you are fitted for this particular one? And, maybe the way to succeed at life is to give up at chasing this goal, because this isn't really what you're cut out for. Maybe you're cut out for something different, and the longer you go at pursuing this thing that you're not cut out for, the more and more unhappy you will be, because you're not doing what you actually should be doing, so you're not getting the happiness that you can have, and you're probably going to do a really bad job at achieving this because you're not made for it. And so you're kind of just going to be making yourself more and more miserable as you chase the thing that is never going to lead to your success. Now, the same thing can happen in a wide variety of ways. It's entirely possible that somebody who wants to be a football star, like a star quarterback in the NFL, but they're just not very good at it. Despite spending 4 hours a day practicing, yeah, they're like, better than the other people, within a half-mile radius. But in the big picture, they're never going to even come close to making it, despite the fact that they really desperately want to. Well, if you give up, you have the possibility of actually succeeding at something you can genuinely succeed at. And so this comes, so I mean, I've been talking about the big things. This also often comes at small things. You find all sorts of stuff. Like for example, work smarter, not harder. When that is good, when that is good advice, because it's often not. But when that is good advice, this is another example of that kind of thing. Instead of pouring more and more effort into the same small goal, think about whether or not that's the right goal to get you to where you want to be, or if there is some other goal that will work much better as an intermediate goal to getting to where you're going. So, I mean, this can be very simple things too. Like I was recently I'm a professional programmer, and I was recently doing some JavaScript work where, as you're doing it, there's a development server, but there's problems caused by the way that browsers work if you're trying to go to multiple servers at the same time for things, and it really doesn't work well, and you have to build. And one way around this problem, if you insist on using the multiple servers and using them directly and so on, is to keep on just building layers of abstraction and doing complex configurations. And I was kind of going down this path, and then I decided to stop. I'm like, you know what? There's got to be a better way than this. There's got to be something that is not doing this overly complicated thing that isn't even like what you're going to do when you put it into production. There's got to be some simpler way, because like other people will have faced this exact problem. It must exist. And so I gave up at trying to get this overly complex approach to work and spent some time looking around for what other approaches exist, and then discovered, aha, there actually turns out to be a proxy within the very development server so that you can actually pretend, so you can very easily and straightforwardly make it look like there's only one server and use real URLs and have so much less complexity and things that can break and just have it work a lot better. And so this is an example where I was going to add yet another collection of URLs to my complicated way of doing it, and I just gave up. No, I'm not doing this. Maybe I'll have to, but right now, no, I'm not. And I went and spent, it didn't even take me very long to find a much better way of doing things. So it works in the small, it works in the microcosm as well as the macrocosm. It works at all levels to consider, like, is the thing that I'm doing actually a good way of getting to my real goal? Like, yeah, I've got this goal. I can focus on this goal. I can, head down, stare at my local goal, this little goal here, and it's a lot harder than I thought it would be, but I can power my way through this. Yeah, maybe. And maybe that's what you have to do. Sometimes, like, the only way you stack a whole lot of bricks is one brick at a time. Pile them on top of each other. There isn't a smart way to work there. You just have to put in the effort. But so it's a thing that's always worth looking at. And this is just a different way of putting advice that you'll see in various ways, because, like, reevaluate your approach is a normal part of being a human being. I'm not bringing any revelation here. I'm not describing anything that nobody's ever heard of before. I'm just offering another way of looking at the same advice, a sort of different framing, a different perspective on the same advice, because sometimes you kind of get stuck in thinking of the things that is applying in one particular way when they apply in several, and you need a shift in perspective to see how the things that you already know apply in a different way. So I want to be clear, this is not... if this is some massive revelation to anybody, the general concept of reevaluate your means periodically just because you might have made a mistake and there might be a better way of doing things is a revelation, then you have my prayers, because you should have been taught better than that by now. But I kind of suspect that's absolutely nobody who, at the very least, who's watching this video. I suspect that's approximately nobody. This is just a different way of looking at what you already know in order to possibly use what you already know more profitably. So, until next time, may you hit everything you aim at. If you like this video, then clicking the like button, according to YouTube, will make them more likely to recommend it to others. If you know anyone who might get something out of this video, then it would be kind to share it with them, or just share it on social media in general. And if you'd like to see future videos of mine, you can subscribe. And if you're not in the habit of checking your subscriptions page regularly, then I suggest clicking the notification bell and setting that to always, because otherwise subscribing to a channel basically just sort of like gives YouTube a hint that maybe it should consider recommending these videos to you, possibly at some point, if they think so. It's a funny world we live in. God bless.